What is going on, guys? Welcome to the second episode of the Python tutorial series for beginners. In today's video we're going to talk about variables and data types. Now in the last episode we wrote our first Hello World program and mentioned that we need to use quotation marks to define the data type of the value. Now all values in Python have data types. In this case it was a text value, and the data type which is used for text in Python is called string. It is one of the multiple data types we can choose from, and it is called string because a text is actually just a string of characters. So in this video we're going to get a brief overview of the different data types that Python offers, and we're also going to learn how to work with variables. Now let us start with the data type that we already know, the string. The string has the keyword str, and we're going to talk about the importance of these keywords later on in this video, but for now just know this string has the keyword str. And it always has to be surrounded by some kind of quotation marks. So we can use double quotation marks, we can use single quotation marks, and we can also use triple quotation marks if we want to define multi-line strings. So this would be a multi-line string over multiple lines, and then we close it again with a triple quotation. So this is basically our text data type. Now the next data type on our list is the integer, and an integer represents a whole number. So everything like 10 or 9 or also -3, everything that has no decimal places, that's just a whole number, either negative or positive, is an integer. So the basic number type, you could say. If for some reason, however, you need to work with decimal places, you can work with floating point numbers. These have the keyword float, and these are numbers like 10.9 or 9.345 or -8.763, whatever. These are floating point numbers, and we use them if we need more precision in our calculations. Now if that's still not enough and you're working with some advanced mathematics, Python also allows you to define a complex number. So for this you use the complex function, and you pass a real part, like 10 for example, and an imaginary part, let's say 5, and this would give you a complex number that you can do calculations with, so 10.5i in this case. Now if you don't know how complex numbers work, it doesn't matter because that's more into mathematics, it's not so much programming, so if you don't need it, just don't use it. So these are the number types, but there's also a special data type called boolean, and a boolean has the keyword bool, and it can only have one of two values. So it can either be true with a capital T or false with a capital F. And it's basically a binary type because it cannot be something in between. It has to be either 1 or 0, on or off, or true or false, and so on. We're going to use this data type a lot when it comes to conditions, if statements, and loops in future episodes. So these are the basic data types. Actually, we also have some sequences like lists and tuples and dictionaries and so on, but these are sequences and they will be the topic of future episodes, so we're going to skip them for now. So let us now talk a little bit about the importance of data types. For example, when we have the string 10 and the number 10 or the integer 10, these would give us the same output when we print them. But they are very different and they behave differently as well. When we print the result of the strings 10 plus 10, for example, let's say 10 plus 10, we would get a different result than we would get when we print the integers 10 plus 10. So let us run the script. As you can see, when we say 10 plus 10 in the string world, it says append one string onto the end of another string, because we have the string 10, and when we add another string 10, it just puts another string at the end of the first string. However, if we add two numbers, of course, we get the sum, the arithmetic sum, the result of the calculation. And this somehow gets us to the next question. How can we know what data type a value has? We'll not always be able to determine it by just looking at it, because sometimes the values will be stored in variables. But for this we have a specific function called type. The type function returns the data type of a variable or a value. So let's say type 10, and this would return me the data type of this value. Returning means that it just gives me this data type. It does not mean that it prints the data type, but just I get this value back. So I could save it in a variable later on, or I can print it. So what I do here is I say give me the type of 10 and then print this result. So in this case, we would get class int for integer. And when I now say quotation marks, so it's now a string, when I run this, I get class str for string. So if we're not sure what data type we're dealing with, we can always use the type function. Now let us get to the second part of this video, the variables. Defining variables in Python is very simple. We just choose a variable name like x or y or something else, and we then assign a value to it. So x could be 10, y could be hello, and whatever could be true. Now our variables work like placeholders, so we can use them for further processing. This is useful because sometimes we don't know what the value of the variable will be, but we still want to perform operations on it. This might be the case with user input or when we load data from the internet. So I could just go ahead and say print x, for example, and it would not print the letter x, it would print the value that's stored in x, so 10. And if I print y, it would give me hello and so on. Or if I say y is 20, for example, I can say print x plus y, save it, and I would get 30. So I can use variables as placeholders. Now Python is a dynamically typed language. This means that we don't have to define a specific data type for our variable in advance. Also, a variable can change its data type all the time. In other languages like Java or C++, we would have to define a static data type for each variable. So it would still be possible to change the value, but an integer variable could not just change the value to a string. In Python, this is possible. So we can say x equals 10, and it starts as an integer. Later on, I can say x equals some string, and then I can say x equals true, and it changes not only its value but also its data type. In other programming languages, or in most programming languages, this is not possible. I would have to say something like int x, and then I would have to stay in the integer realm. I would have to stay with this data type. So we're now getting to the last part of this video, which is about typecasting. Now imagine we have some user input that is of the data type string, but it actually contains a number and we want to do calculations with it. So for example, I could say user input x equals number 120, but in a string format. In this case, we couldn't do any calculations with the input because when we try to divide it by 4, for example, let's say print x divided by 4, what I would get is a type error. So as you can see, type error because I cannot just use this operator for division on strings and integers. So I have to have two integers here, or two floats, two number types basically. So we would have to convert the value to another data type, and we do this by using the data type keywords that we mentioned in the beginning of this video. So when I have the variable x and I want to get an integer out of it, what I can do is I can say x equals, and then I use the int function, so I use the int keyword for integer, and I pass to it the value of x. So I have x equals int x. So I get the value of x, turn it into an integer, and then assign it back to x. Now that we have done this, we can do the calculation with it, because you can see 120 over 4 equals 30, and it works because now we're dealing with two number types. However, this only works when the string really contains a number. Otherwise, we would get a so-called value error because we cannot just typecast a text into an integer. So if I have x equals hello, I cannot just go ahead and say typecast into int, because as you can see, value error, I cannot just convert some letters into numbers. So that's everything you need to know about variables and data types for now. In the next video, we're going to cover operators and user input, so these will allow us to perform actions on our values and variables. So keep going and watch the future episodes. It will get more and more interesting over time, And if you haven't done it yet, subscribe to this channel if you want to see more. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and feel free to ask questions and give feedback in the comment section down below. Thank you very much.